Hey, thanks for checking out Nuts and Bolts with Tone, and welcome to my channel. Today I have a 2007 3.3 liter Hyundai with a pretty bad oil leak. Let's take a look at what this thing looks like from underneath. So it's been dripping for a few days. I cleaned it all up after I did the front cover, but this whole transmission was engulfed in oil all down here. I've been spraying it off. It's been sitting for like a week waiting for me to get to it. But I mean, look at all the oil. So we'll look at what this looks like. So this is going to be from a leak in your engine valley. You can't really see it. I can't really show it to you from up top, but we're going to disassemble it and repair this oil leak. And I'm going to show you how to do that. Let's get started. Your oil leak is going to be coming from way down there. This is what it's going to look like before we get started. So we need to get all of this off. But it's going to be this oil filter base housing, and it's going to look something like this. So here's the oil filter here. You got your pressure switch. It's going to come like this. This is from Hyundai. So the top part comes as an assembly, and it's going to look like that. The underside looks like that. You're going to have a seal here, seal there, and you got a spot here on both sides for your wires to go underneath. So first step, we need to go ahead and get this intake air tube out of here. We're going to get the purge valve out, disconnect some sensors. Got to get the purge valve out of the way. So you can take it out as an assembly. Disconnect it from the plenum, disconnect it from the fuel line, take the bolt out, unplug the connector, throw it on the bench. Next, you got the bolts that come across for this harness that comes across here. Now these are two connectors here. The black one goes to the back and the gray one goes to the front. You just need to pop one of them off so they can separate. So then you got to take the bracket off right there. You're going to undo your throttle body, just set it down. Don't disconnect the coolant hoses at this time. You're going to have your O2 sensor connectors over here. You need to take those out. And there's going to be a 14 millimeter back here through the bracket that holds a bracket to the back of the plenum. And you have your brake booster hose. Go ahead and take that out. So the bracket that goes through the back, there's also a bracket here. That's what the O2 sensors bolt to or clip to. There's going to be a 12 milli right there behind the throttle body going into a bracket. And then you have this PCV fresh air. You want to go ahead and just take the 10s out and just disconnect the hose, get it out of the way. That way you don't have to deal with it. And then you're going to take all your 12s out for the You're going to need a long hex set like this. I use the Carbine Tools long hex. So we're going to need the 6 millimeter long hex. All right. So what we're going to do is you want to stick a rag under here. You got, you want to be careful not to spray your fuel, but whatever. Throw a rag under here. You got two 10 millimeter nuts that hold the fuel line on. We're going to take out the 10s for the fuel rails, but we're not going to take the fuel injectors out. You just need to move the fuel rails over to get to these Allens here. You're going to have two 12 millimeter nuts on the front here, and the rest are going to be that 6 millimeter Allen. You're going to undo all of that. On your front, before you do your plenum, if you undo your injector connectors and your coil connectors, you can pull this back like this and get it out of the way. Your rear injector connectors are on this bracket, which bolts to the plenum. So I took everything off this bracket except for the injectors, so they're going to stay there. Here's the coil connector for the rear. Going to just tuck that out of the way. So we're going to go ahead and get this off. Like I said, do not take your injectors out. We're only going to be maneuvering it. Oh, and you got a 10 there. That holds the fuel rails in place. So we need to get this out of here so we can get to what's leaking. But then before we can take that out, we have to take out this coolant crossover pipe. So drain your coolant. All right, a couple things you want to do is you got these solenoids here. Go ahead and disconnect them. The harnesses are going to go through here. Just move them out of the way. You're going to have this harness right here attached there. And you're going to have another one there that goes over there. All right, just be mindful that that goes underneath this oil filter base. And we need to make sure that the the harnesses are laid across here, so we need to disconnect this one and lay it across here, and disconnect that one, lay it across there. You're going to want to mark any hoses that you're going to have to disconnect, like that coolant hose right there. You're going to have to disconnect that coolant hose. You're going to have to disconnect that coolant hose right there. I just resealed the timing cover, and so that's why this has brand new hose clamps on there. We had a leak back here where the black silicone is. We had was leaking out of there, and we got done, and it still leaks, so we know that the base is leaking as well. But I had a leak out here in the front of the timing cover as well, so I knew I had to reseal the timing cover. So anyways, so from here, you're gonna want to disconnect harnesses, cam sensors, things like that. We are gonna have to take the throttle body out, only because it's attached to all of this, the big crossover that goes from head to head. You're gonna need to take your radiator hoses off. If you have worm drive clamps, make sure you mark them so they go back where they're supposed to be, because worm drive clamps have a square spot in them, and if you put it back in the wrong spot, it'll leak. So we're going to disconnect both of those, and just undo as much of your harness as you can. Heater hoses, anything that connects through here. As I get stuff moved out of the way, I'll show you all the different things we have to disconnect. You're going to want to disconnect all the harnesses, all the brackets and everything over here. Disconnect the connector down here. Disconnect all of this so you can roll the harness up there. You're going to have a couple connectors. You're going to have one back here. You're going to have one here. You're going to have a few. You're going to have a couple bolts that bolt the harness down. So you want to try to tuck the harness out of the way, like that. You're going to want to disconnect the upper hose and lower hose. Get those disconnected. Go ahead and take your vacuum hose off of here. And we got to get, so this right here, this is connected to there. We need to get this off because this is a sub harness for the oil pressure switch right there. So we got to get that disconnected, because the oil pressure switch is going to stay with the oil filter housing, and this is actually going to stay with the car. You got to take the heater hose off. You got to take that heater hose off, and you're going to disconnect both of these coolant lines right here, and the throttle body will come out. Mark your lines with your connectors. And now you're going to go ahead and disconnect this coolant hose here, unbolt the 10s that hold this pipe in, disconnect this hose here, or maybe disconnect it there, whatever's easier for your application. And then we got to get this harness, so that connector right there is the connector for, we got to get this harness out of here. We also have to disconnect this coolant hose right here, this heater hose, and there's going to be some clips that we're going to have to disconnect, and one more temp sensor right there. So once you've got everything loose, there's like another bracket over here that holds a harness. You're going to have some studs and nuts. Somebody else has worked on this, so I'm not quite sure what's supposed to be here, because they have all the wrong size bolts and nuts. But anyways, it's going to pop in. There's a little sub pipe here. It's going to pop in here into the base, and now you just got to get it out. I don't know that I'll be able to do it one-handed. Let's see. Let me just get it out. So there's what it looks like when it's out. You got 3 bolts and nuts here and here. You got your lower hose, upper hose, lower hose, upper hose. You got the 2 heater hoses, your 2 throttle body hoses, and then this pipe here, which connects to, I'm not sure if this comes out of here or not. I mean, it looks like a sub pipe, but maybe not. Anyways, so you're gonna need an O-ring for that. I'll show you the seals. So now we're at a point where now we got all that off, and now we can start working on the center. You got to make sure, remember, like I said before, get your harnesses out and get those ready to be out of the way. And then I'm not sure if the new one has it or not, but we need to make sure that these clips get transferred to the new one. You got to take the air box out. You got to take the battery out, take the battery tray out, unclip your harness here for your battery cables so they can move like that. Air box. So your battery tray is a 10 and 4 12s and a bunch of clips. Your air box is just going to be 2 10s. Gonna pop that out. You're gonna have to push the harness down like this because it slides out like that. So this harness already sits right there in this little hump here. This harness normally is over here. You have to pull it back to here because it has to push up inside like that to slide it out. And then from here, we have it out. It's really hard to get out. You have to slide it out like this. It was hard with two hands, so definitely couldn't show you with one hand. So that's how you get it out, and so now we got to clean it. And here's what the bottom looks like. Just like that. One thing I did was I took out the oil control solenoid right there. 110 millimeter, it pops out. So from here, we're gonna do a lot of cleaning. Got to make sure you get all the silicone off the front cover. The only seals are gonna be that O-ring there, and then the gasket that's there. All this that was full of oil was not supposed to be full of oil because the knock sensors sit in there. There's nothing there. It's just an engine valley. The only chambers are here and there, and that end there, and then obviously the pipe that comes out the back. So for this O-ring right here, this pipe does not come out. For this O-ring right here, you're gonna need one of these guys here. Not 100% certain that's your part number, but that's what's coming up for me. And for the seal that goes in the timing cover at the front of the oil filter base, you're gonna need to get a timing cover set right there. And it has the O-ring in there. It'll have a couple gaskets, but I couldn't find just the O-ring, so you got to get a timing cover set. I already did the timing cover, so unfortunately we had to get another set. Once you get done cleaning it, this is what it should look like. You have the oval right there on that, right in the very center of the screen. That's where the front seal on the oil filter base is, near the timing cover. And then you have this rectangle there, and then that little port. You need to make sure all that's clean because you have a gasket that goes around that. Also in the front of your timing cover, there's an O-ring that goes right there. You need to make sure that's all clean, and make sure that you have any silicone scraped away from around the timing cover so it doesn't hit the oil filter base when you're putting it in, and also it doesn't interfere when it pushes up against the timing cover. And since this valley is open and there's no gaskets, any oil is going to go right down into these knock sensor holes. So you want to make sure you get all that cleaned out as well so it doesn't spill out over. One thing you want to pay attention to is the thickness of the oil filter base. This oil filter base, the old one, is twice as thick as the new one. So when I put the bolts in, they were sitting up like that once I torqued them because the bolts bottomed out. So if you don't have a bolt bin like I do, you're going to have to order bolts for it. Hopefully Hyundai can help you. Getting parts and gaskets and bolts from Hyundai is god-awful. They have the worst system. This is what I'm using right here. I have these E10s from a Sprinter. And so I'm using those for a few of the bolts. The longer ones, they work. It's only the ones that go around the base, around the sides. So once you slide it all the way in, you have to take that top piece out. You have to wiggle it in around the knock sensor harnesses. Make sure the knock sensors are routed correctly and torque it down. So before you put your oil filter base in, you want to make sure you spray out all your bolt holes in the block because your bolts won't tighten up properly. But one of the things that I did was this timing cover, this oil filter base doesn't have anything that pulls it into the timing cover. There's no bolts or anything like that. So what I did was I put the O-ring in there and I put a little bit of silicone on the end of the oil filter base just to make sure that I didn't have any issues. I didn't want to have a coolant leak because of that O-ring. And then these are the bolt holes right here. Those are the ones you want to make sure you spray out all the way around the perimeter. And the top piece is 105 inch-pounds as well, top and bottom. Once you get your oil filter base in, you want to put your coolant manifold back on, and it's 17.36 foot-pounds. A couple things not to forget. That coolant temp right there Don't forget that. Go ahead and put all your heater hoses and everything on. Don't forget to wrap your knock sensor wiring around there and put it in its respective areas where it goes. If you took that oil control solenoid out, don't forget to put it back. Connect your oil control solenoids and put your coolant hose back on there and bring it over and connect it over here and bolt it down with your 210s. And then we're going to put the lower intake back on. Once you get your lower intake manifold on, your nuts are going to be 18 foot-pounds and your bolts are going to be 23 foot-pounds. Once you get the lower intake on, we're going to go ahead and wrap this wiring harness back and get everything hooked up that we can, minus the plenum. So once you get that all done and have your wiring, don't forget to put your throttle body back in while everything is off before you put your plenum in. It's easier to connect those hoses. Connect your solenoid, your connector back there for your knock sensor. Plug in your throttle body. And then the last step is going to be your upper intake. It's going to be 18 foot-pounds for the bolts and the nuts around the perimeter, and then 105 inch-pounds for this long 10 mil. And that's it. Put it back, put all this stuff back, and you're good to go. Let me tell you, this Hyundai has been quite the adventure. Someone in the past did head gaskets and resealed the whole motor before me. And they used like a gazillion amounts of silicone. They didn't torque anything right. And they ended up having all kinds of mismatched bolts. And the crazy thing is, after I got done doing this oil filter base, I ended up having to pull the heads. And when I pulled the heads on it, the threads came out of the block. So I ended up having to get a used engine and do it all over again. I had to pull the used engine all the way down to a long block and reseal the whole thing before it was finally done. So this was a very long project. So anyways, after watching this, you should feel pretty confident doing this oil filter base, as it is very difficult to, it appears that it is very difficult to do because you can't get to it. So anyways, thanks for watching. Hit the like button, hit subscribe button, and hit the bell to get notified of all my future content, which you definitely don't want to miss. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.